Let me ask you something that sounds simple, but it's actually one of the most dangerous questions in personal finance. How much money is enough? Not what would be nice, not what would impress people, not what would finally prove I'm doing okay. I mean enough, where your brain stops moving the finish line. Because here's the weird part. We all assume that if we had billionaire money, the kind of wealth where you could never spend it all, then peace would be automatic. But what if the opposite happens? What if more money actually makes enough harder to reach? Today, we're talking about the psychology of why billionaires can't stop, and why the same brain wiring quietly traps normal people into chasing a number that never arrives. And by the end of this video, I'll give you a practical enough framework that you can apply to your own life so you don't win the money game and still feel like you're losing. This isn't a billionaire hate video. This is a human brain video. Because if you understand this, you don't just become better with money, you become harder to be manipulated by status, comparison, and constant wanting. The enough paradox. Most people imagine enough like a finish line. Once I hit 100K, I'll feel secure. Once I hit 1 million, I'll feel free. Once I hit 10 million, I'll be untouchable. But almost nobody realizes the finish line is on wheels. Here's the pattern. You pick a number, you chase it, you hit it, your brain immediately goes, okay, but now what? And you don't even notice it happening because the shift feels logical. You hit 100K and now 250K feels responsible. You hit 250K and now 500K feels safe. You hit 500K and now 1 million feels real freedom. That's not ambition, that's a moving goalpost. And the higher you go, the more the goalpost moves, not because your needs grow, but because your reference point changes. Hedonic adaptation. Why the upgrade stops feeling like an upgrade. Psychologists have a name for this, hedonic adaptation, often explained through the hedonic treadmill. The treadmill is the idea that life changes, good or bad, can temporarily shift happiness, but many people drift back toward a baseline over time. One of the most famous early examples people discuss is a study comparing major lottery winners to controls and to accident victims, often cited in conversations about how humans adapt to dramatic circumstances. Now, I'm not saying money doesn't matter. Money absolutely matters. Money can remove stress, buy safety, buy time, and prevent suffering. But what hedonic adaptation explains is this. Your brain is a normalization machine. It turns miracles into routines. That's why your dream apartment becomes just my place. Your dream salary becomes my pay. Your dream lifestyle becomes normal. So if you're a billionaire, the private jet might feel exciting for a while, but the brain adapts. And once the brain adapts, the jet doesn't feel like winning, it feels like maintenance. And when luxury becomes maintenance, satisfaction collapses. Social comparison. Enough depends on who you're standing next to. Here's where it gets dark. Even if you adapt to your own wealth, you still have one thing your brain can't ignore: other people. Social psychologists have long studied how we evaluate ourselves by comparing to others. This is the foundation of social comparison processes discussed by Leon Festinger. So your brain doesn't ask, do I have enough to live well? It asks, how do I rank? This is why a person with $2 million can feel rich in one neighborhood and broke in another. A founder can sell a company for $50 million and feel like a failure if their friend sold for $500 million. The crazy part is the comparison group changes as you level up. At 100K, you compare to coworkers. At 1 million, you compare to investors and entrepreneurs. At 100 million, you compare to people who can influence markets. At 10 billion, you compare to people who can influence governments. So enough stops being about comfort. It becomes about status and dominance. When wealth becomes a scoreboard, there is no winning. only leading or falling behind.
Loss aversion, the fear that never leaves. Now let's talk about the emotion that keeps people running even when they're already at the top. Fear of loss. In prospect theory, Kahneman and Tversky described how people evaluate gains and losses relative to a reference point, famously emphasizing that losses loom larger than gains. If you're worth $10 million, going to $11 million feels nice. Falling to $9 million feels like a crisis, even though you'd still be financially set. At billionaire level, loss isn't just money. Loss is reputation, power, relevance, narrative, like I'm the winner, identity, like I'm the builder. So they don't keep going because they need more. They keep going because less feels psychologically unbearable. When your identity is the empire, enough feels like surrender. The goal gradient effect. The closer you get, the faster you run. There's a powerful motivation effect called the goal gradient hypothesis. The tendency to approach a goal increases as you get closer to it. This idea traces back to Clark Hull's work. You see it everywhere. People study hardest right before finals. People sprint when the finish line appears. People work overtime when the promotion is almost there. Now put that in billionaire terms. If someone is chasing top 10 richest or richest in the world, the closer they get, the more intense the obsession becomes, because the reward isn't money, it's victory. And victory is addictive because it temporarily shuts off doubt.
Let's ground this in research so we don't fall into slogans like money can't buy happiness. Kahneman and Deaton's work found that high income improves life evaluation, while emotional well-being showed different patterns. This is where the popular plateau idea comes from. But later, Matthew Killingsworth used experience sampling data and reported that experienced well-being rose with income even above $75,000. And large global analyses have suggested satiation points can occur and also vary by region and measure. One widely cited paper reported satiation around $95,000 for life evaluation and $60,000 to $75,000 for emotional well-being globally, with variation. So what's the real conclusion? Money helps, especially when it reduces stress and buys stability. But after certain needs are met, the biggest threat isn't lack of money, it's the psychology of never arriving. Because the mind can always invent a new reason the current level isn't enough. Why some billionaires still work, the nuanced truth. To be fair, not every billionaire is trapped. Some genuinely love the work. Warren Buffett, for example, is widely described as someone who enjoys running Berkshire Hathaway and has maintained a relatively modest lifestyle compared to his wealth. So yes, sometimes it's passion, purpose, and craft. But here's what I want you to notice. Even when it's passion, it can still become a psychological shield. Because if you're always building, you never have to sit with the uncomfortable question, if I stop, am I still enough? That question is where many people panic, rich or not. The moving goalposts loop. If you remember one thing from this video, remember this loop. Achieve, you hit the goal. Adapt, it becomes normal. Compare, you look sideways and see someone ahead. Fear loss, you imagine falling behind. Raise goal, you set a bigger number. Repeat. This is how someone can have more than they could ever spend and still feel behind, because the chase isn't for money, it's for relief. And relief doesn't last when you build your life on a scoreboard.
The enough framework. Practical, shareable. Okay, so how do we escape this? I'm going to give you a framework that turns enough from a vibe into a plan. The three numbers of enough. 1. The stability number. This is the amount of money that makes your life function without constant emergencies. Essentials paid. High interest debt controlled. Basic insurance and health needs covered. Small buffer so every bill isn't a crisis. 2. The freedom number. This is the amount that buys back your time. It usually includes an emergency fund, consistent investing, a lifestyle that doesn't require constant financial heroics. 3. The purpose number.
This is the amount where extra money mainly buys status upgrades, ego protection, winning feelings, instead of meaning. And listen, this number can be different for everyone, but here's how you know you're near it. When you imagine earning more and your life doesn't get better, you just get more impressed by yourself for a few hours. That's not fulfillment, that's dopamine. The anti-goalpost playbook, behavioral fixes that actually work. Here are 4 practical moves to stop the goalposts from sprinting away. 1. Freeze your enough definition for 12 months. Write your enough numbers down, then make a rule. You can only revise them once a year, because if you revise them every month, your brain will always win. 2. Switch from net worth goals to lifestyle system goals. Instead of, I need X dollars, ask, how many months of runway do I want? What % of my income do I invest? How many hours per week do I own? Systems reduce obsession. Scoreboards increase obsession. 3. Build a comparison filter. If you feel behind, ask, am I comparing my real life to someone's highlight reel? Or worse, am I comparing my chapter 3 to their chapter 20? 4. Create a satisfaction deposit ritual. Once per week, 2 minutes. Write 3 things money already solved for you. Write 1 thing you're chasing that might be status, not value. This interrupts hedonic adaptation by making gains conscious. Yes, it sounds simple, that's why it works. Here's what nobody tells you. If you don't define enough, the world will define it for you. And the world's definition is infinite. Infinite hustle, infinite upgrades, infinite comparison. But enough is a decision you make on purpose. And once you make it, you stop chasing money for identity and start using money as a tool. If you want part 2, I'll make it tactical. How to calculate your freedom number, what to prioritize first, and a step-by-step path that doesn't rely on motivation. Comment enough if you want that next.